Okay, so one of the things we'll need to know how to do is how to do math, especially multiplying and dividing, with what these square roots of negative numbers. Now, these square roots of negative numbers are called pure imaginary numbers. Square root of any negative number. Anything that has the I in it, basically. Now, in order to multiply or divide these, it's pretty much the same thing we have with the regular square roots. You really want to simplify before you multiply or divide. Now, with the regular square roots, if you didn't simplify first, if you had actually multiplied or divided, your work would be a little bit harder, but you would still end up with the same answer. With imaginary numbers, though, that's not the case. You absolutely have to simplify first. So in this first problem, I'm multiplying negative 8 times negative 24. So the very first thing I need to do is simplify these things. So I'm going to pull out the I. And then I'm going to simplify each of the radicals. That's a square root. Sorry, perfect square. So I can pull out a 2. I already had an I sitting there, so let me erase that. I make 2I. Have this 2 left behind. Over here with 24, that's 4 times 6. 4 is a perfect square, so that can come out of the 2. There was already an I sitting there. 6 doesn't break up anymore. Okay. Now, once you've got this simplified, now you can multiply. So when you multiply again, remember outside times outside, inside times inside. 2I times 2I is 4I squared. And then on the inside, 2 times 6 is 12. Now, here's the key to this. This I squared, this is the square root of negative 1 squared. So whenever you square a square root, you should get the number on the inside, right? So if I square the square root of negative 1, I better get negative 1. Otherwise, it's not the square root of negative 1. So this I squared is always negative 1 because that's the definition of what I is. It's the square root of negative 1. So that I squared that's sitting there is going to be negative 1. And then the square root of 12 breaks down more. So my answer on this would end up being negative 8 square roots of 3. So simplify first, pull out any i's. Make sure that you know that when you multiply, it's outside times outside, inside times inside. Anytime you get an I squared, it's negative 1, and then make sure you simplify it at the end. So with the division, it's much the same. Simplify first. So square root of negative 27 would be I square root of 27. Square root of negative 12 would be I square root of 12, but I could break those down further. The square root of 27 is square root of 3 times square root of 9. So 3I square root of 3. And then the square root of 12 is the square root of 3 times the square root of 4. So 2I square root of 3. And if you look at that fraction, square root of 3 on top and bottom, that's a common factor. I and I cancel out. And so this ends up being just plain 3 halves. So again, simplify, do the operation. Remember that I squared, if you get it, is negative 1, and then simplify at the end.